Okay, thank you very much. This feels a bit like deja vu. Do you understand deja vu? I've done this before, very recently. Our partners over here in Sweden are Embrace. They are, it's a new alliance between our organisations. I work for a company in the UK called TalarMade. Before that, I worked for the NHS, the healthcare system, where I was responsible for orthotic services in England. No pressure there. So a little bit about TalarMade and our journey, and kind of what we've tried to do. I've been there for 5 years. For my sins, I'm apparently the expert orthotist for the United Kingdom. All that means is when something goes wrong, I get pushed forwards, yeah, generally. At TalarMade, we are a manufacturer of OEM devices, prefabricated devices. That's what we're experts in. Our expertise, and my personal expertise, is in spines and, most importantly, feet. I'm a footman. Footman first, spine man second. We have an evidence-based approach to everything we do at TalarMade now because I'm in charge. My master's degree is in evidence-based healthcare at Oxford University. I was taught how to do literature searching and critical appraisal by the head of the Cochrane collaboration. So if any of you know a Cochrane study, and if you've ever tried to get anything accepted by Cochrane, you know how hard that is. This guy scared me to death. The first ever literature search I did, I presented to him and he looked at me and he went, "You think that's acceptable?" And I tried really hard. So I got beaten into understanding about good research and bad research and research methodology. And there is good evidence for lots of orthotics, particularly with feet and ankles. But in terms of necks and weakness and conditions of weakness, there's very little research, if any. Any of you ever read a study about collars for neck weakness? So in the red folders, which you all had on the way in, and 2 of you don't have them, you will find 3 published studies on collars that all relate to this product we're about to show you. So this is a product that was developed in the United Kingdom. It was funded and run through the National Health Service Institute for Research. And it was conducted by Professor Christopher McDermott. Professor Christopher McDermott is the world's leading ALS consultant neurologist. He is in charge of an organisation called the Motor Neurone Disease Association. So in the UK, motor neurone disease is ALS. They're the same thing, different names. Okay? A bit like me in the daytime, I'm Simon. At the night, when you see me bowling tonight, I'll be Susan. Nice dress, shave one leg. I won't be ready. So, a whole load of researchers, a whole load of organisations. All of these organisations exist to try to improve the world and to help people, whether they are universities or Devices for Dignity or organisations like Citron and other things moving forward. So, how does this all begin? Well, what happened was that this group of people, supported by all of these people, exist to try to improve the care that is given to patients with varying complexities of problems. And they met with a group of patients from the Motor Neurone Disease Association and said, "What's your biggest problem? What do you struggle with? Have you got any equipment or any devices that you need and that you've been given, but they just don't do what they're supposed to do, or you're not comfortable?" That was the plan. And the thing that came out, number 1, was head control. Patients with ALS develop head control issues in over 80% of cases. Okay? So, to do research, you need money. So, do any of you remember this? The Ice Bucket Challenge. So the Ice Bucket Challenge started when a young man's mother had passed away and he'd been diagnosed with ALS at the age of 23 in the United States. And to try to make people more aware of ALS, he poured a bucket of water over his head. That raised, that event, $40 million. And the vast majority of that money was given to the Motor Neurone Disease Association through the ALS groups in the United States. And this development team were given £50,000 to start the HeadUp Collar project with money generated by the Ice Bucket Challenge. So if you did the Ice Bucket Challenge, the money you raised may have contributed towards the development of that project. So on behalf of patients, thank you. The other thing I'll just say right now, which I didn't say to the other group, is every HeadUp Collar we sell, we give money back to the research team and to the Motor Neurone Disease Association so that they can research other things. They've nearly got their money back, which is fantastic. So we have this fairly unique global event that is trying to address the needs of a very specific group of patients who have head control. We're all happy with that. That's the plan. So how do you implement a plan like that? Well, you have to understand the problem. So the problem is that there are fundamentally two types of collar on the market for these patients. There's soft stuff and there's hard stuff. Patients wear the soft stuff and go, doesn't really do anything. And they wear the hard stuff and go, it hurts. Yeah? The risk of the hard stuff from a physiotherapist's point of view is if you stop a head moving and that patient has a progressive muscular weakness, they'll get weaker faster. Yes? That's why we don't give collars to people when they have whiplash injuries in hospitals anymore. They all got weaker. We don't want them to get weaker. We can't make them stronger, but we definitely don't want to make them weaker. There were all sorts of other issues that these restricted movement. So this is a group of patients who are getting weak, but they want to move, but they can't move themselves. They don't want a lot, do they? They want something quite unique and different. And when the group sat down and met, they came up with, through using a very reliable research methodology, a series of criteria which described what they wanted. They wanted support with movement. They wanted... Oh, hi Siri. Thank you. It rang the first time. Switch your phone off. Tell me next time. They wanted something which was customizable. It could be asymmetric. Some of them had head issues that were side to side and rotation and other problems. They wanted it to be adjustable according to their patient needs. So some of the patients were very clear that they felt they needed a lot of support when they were traveling in a car, but they required less support when they were eating or drinking or reading a book. And some people report that they like their head to be in different positions for different activities. So have you all heard of dysphagia? Dysphagia is a problem of swallowing. Well, if you have motor neurone disease, a certain population of the patients struggle to swallow with their head up because when they swallow, their food goes into their lungs through their trachea. So they tend to eat with their head further forwards so that their food goes down their esophagus. So they want to be here when they eat, but they want to be here when they're not. So we have this group of patients who potentially want different degrees of support for people whose heads may be straight or wonky. They want to be able to move. They want varying degrees of support based on activity. And they want something that looks nice that could be provided at a hospital. That, as a designer, my job, that's a big list, okay? And so the university came up with the idea of developing the HeadUp Collar. And the HeadUp Collar originally combined it of a piece of fabric. It was neoprene originally, that was made and was called a snood that fitted around your neck. And then you could add components to it to give the support that was required, okay? And I'll tell you more about that detail, and we'll try it on one of you later on, and you can have a play with it and move around and you'll see where we got to. So they came up with an idea. They made a load of them, okay? They made them out of available materials that they had, and they treated 20 patients in Sheffield at the teaching hospital there. And after 1 month, those patients were given an interview and a questionnaire, okay? 80% of those patients said that the collar had significantly improved their lives and was better than anything they'd had before. So they were on to something as a pretty good idea. I'll just say, in the time before this, they had 15 to 16 different designs that failed, one of them spectacularly. Well, just going off tangent, which I do, have you ever seen the first collar for neck weakness from 1682? It was developed in Holland. Did you not see that? It was a piece of leather which was placed like a belt over the crop of the chest with a metal nail under one's chin, because they believed at the time that head drop was caused by laziness. So if we stick a big pointy thing under your chin, your head probably won't drop, okay? or you end up with a bit of a hole, okay? Do-it-yourself tracheotomy. So this study was good. It was a good start, but it's one centre in a controlled environment with all the researchers there. And from a research point of view, that's not really very reliable because there's a lot of bias. There's also an awful lot of control. And in the real world, patients may go to a facility, get a treatment, and go home. They're not going to be able to access that facility 24/7. Yeah, and in England, we have waiting lists, so you may have to wait ages to see someone. So they developed and designed a multi-centre study. So this is not published. It will be coming out in January in the Journal of Rehabilitation Medicine. So this will be the 4th publication on HeadUp. 3 of them were before it was launched onto the market. This is a multi-centre trial where the idea was that they would have 10 patients at each centre. They actually recruited 140 patients across 10 sites. The collars were standardized, they were all made the same, they were sent with a set of instructions to these hospitals, nothing else, okay? The patients were just selected, do you have a problem with head control? Yes or no. That was it. There was no how bad have you, how long have you had it, what's your condition? In the first study, they all had ALS. In this one, they didn't. So this study had 96 patients with ALS, and other patients with other conditions, but they recruited 140 people. Now, 116 of them were fitted with the collar and 24 failed. That's research terminology. 24 of them didn't join the trial. So why didn't they join the trial? Well, 10 of them needed a large. They didn't make a large. 3 of them needed a small. They didn't make a small. So out of the 24 patients that failed the study, over 50% of them was because they didn't have the right size, okay? The other ones found that they couldn't tolerate it, it affected their speech, it was a bit uncomfortable. It wasn't strong enough. They made one shape in one design with one type of reinforcing strut, okay? And they didn't limit criteria. And when you speak to the researchers involved in this study, every one of these patients that failed had had head drop for years. They all had this position where their head was miles in front of their body and their thoracic spine was really kyphotic and bent forwards. So they'd had head drop and probably developed contractures and probably developed really extensive weakness of their long spinal extensors. Okay? The patients who were not ALS patients had cervical myopathy, myasthenia gravis, Kennedy's, extrapyramidal problems, and multiple sclerosis. So a small group of 20 across 10 sites who didn't have ALS. They performed the same follow-up questionnaires after a month. These are the collars those patients were all using. Some of them had rejected a collar, and one of them had tried 14 collars. Now, when I heard that, I was like, there aren't 14 collars. How do you get to 14? I'd struggle to get to 14. I've been doing this job 25 years. 14 collars is pretty much everything in the world, I think, and had rejected it. So, while we just jump into this, I'm going to talk a little bit about healthcare statistics. So, despite the fact that my country is trying to leave the European Union, okay, I voted Remain. Go Europe. The UK is the strictest research environment in the world. We love rules. Yeah? If you look at all of the rules the EU have introduced in the last 20 years, which country has introduced nearly every rule? The UK. Yeah? Holland. No, we're not doing that one. Same with you guys. Yeah? The Germans who write most of these rules, yeah, we're not doing that ourselves, but we think it's a good idea. English people, we'll follow that rule. When it comes to research methodology, we really follow the rules because evidence-based healthcare and the world centre is Oxford University. So for something to get ethics in the UK as a clinical trial, you have got to perform the right statistical analysis. And this is done by one of the leading professors in the world in rehabilitation. So when you look at these graphs, the graph that says previous is their patient's opinion of their previous collars. Okay? HeadUp is obviously HeadUp. The blue section is the patient agrees with the statement. Red, from memory, I'm colorblind, is the next one, I think, and that means they're not sure. And the green section is they disagree, okay? The difference here says no difference because statistically, when you do the calculations for whether something is better than something else, to say that it is highly significant, you have to come out with something called a confidence interval or a p-value of greater than p.001, okay? These are p is 0.1, so they are not statistically significant enough for us to say this is brilliant, but we can say, look, it's a bit better, okay? So in every one of these categories, breathing, swallowing, and perspiration, we'll ignore perspiration for now, breathing and swallowing, can you see that the HeadUps performed a bit better? Yes? But you can also see some patients struggle. Now, what we need to remember is this patient population has a progressive neurological disorder, and there are physiological reasons that might affect their breathing and their swallowing and their eating and their drinking anyway, that you can't change with a collar. So a certain percentage of patients will have that problem anyway, all right? So the patients found the collar to be a little bit better than other collars, but still a bit sweaty. That's this result, okay? If we go into the next lot of data, which is the ability to eat and drink, the HeadUp collar was massively statistically relevant in making massive improvements in that patient's outcome and perception. So every patient in the study pretty much reported an improvement in it. Now, some still had issues, okay? But there is a significant difference in eating and swallowing. So one of the biggest challenges people have in collars is they take them off to eat and drink. If you've ever visited a trauma patient, they often, with a vista, they undo it, don't they, the clever ones, eat their food and then do it back up again before the nurses find them, all right? So we know eating and drinking is better. We also know that the patients felt that the fabric collar with a reinforcing support applied to it, which was flexible, gave them more support, in their own opinion, than a rigid collar. That's a bit weird, okay? But they felt they had more support. They also felt that they could move better. So this is the key thing. Most collars in the world are designed around neck trauma. So the purpose of neck trauma is to stop the trauma tissue from being moved. This one, we want patients to move. They're weak, we don't want to make them weaker. We want them to use the muscles they have. We want to assist those muscles when they're weak. And as they get weaker, we want to assist them more. So this is why we have this adjustable construction. So other things, they like the appearance of it. It was designed to look like a piece of clothing rather than something plastic and medical. And patient satisfaction was much, much better. When we looked at the problems with this, the big problem is you need someone to put the HeadUp collar on for you because it fastens at the back of your head. All right? That's the negative. Okay? So, the results. 77 out of 96 patients, slightly more than 80%, chose the HeadUp collar over every other collar that was on the market. In the patient group with other conditions, exactly 80% chose the HeadUp collar over everything else. So what we know from this research is that this collar is superior to anything else on the market for the management of neurological head drop, but we also know it's not perfect for 1 in 5 people. Now we think the 1 in 5 people are those people who have had head drop for a significant period of time and have lost all of their alignment. And therefore, when you try to correct them and tolerate them, they're either contracted or it requires more force than they can tolerate. Okay? So, this is the gentleman who was in the study. If you go onto YouTube and type in HeadUp collar, the BBC went crazy with this about 6 months ago in England. And this is Philip. Philip was one of the patients involved in the design of the study. Philip was given 2 years to live when he was diagnosed with ALS. I'm seeing him on Monday to provide him with his replacement collar because the one he's in has lasted him 2.5 years, and he's now 4.5 years post-diagnosis. We're not claiming people can live longer, but there seems to be something about they can breathe better and they don't get contractures, and ultimately patients die with ALS as a result of a lack of breath. Speak to any anaesthetist in the world. What's the most important thing? Breathing. Because if you can't breathe, your heart stops. Yeah, breath is super important. So this is just Philip, and when I show you this video, there is a little bit of audio that goes with it, but I want you just to have a look at his natural head position. It's not perfect here. He's bent forward. He's rounded in his shoulders. But I just want you to look at how it's applied and taken off by the patient and his wife, and just have a little bit of a listen to his story. Hold on a moment. Come on. This audio is quite quiet.
My name's Philip, and I was interviewed 2 years ago, almost to the day, wasn't it? 2 years ago, next Thursday. We had the diagnosis. By that stage, my neck, when I stand, my head just falls, and I have very little muscle support. I felt very self-conscious from holiday or an older pub or where my head would be down, eating and drinking would be difficult, communicating that just added to complications that we were facing. Yes, yes. We didn't know how we were going to go. And I'd been Collar for about 18 months. Whatever I'm doing, whether it's reading the newspaper, reading a book, watching TV, out and about, driving, whatever it is, I wear the collar really most of the time. Because even if I'm just sitting reading a book, that little bit of help makes all the difference.
The HeadUp Collar is
So the video goes on, and you can see this on YouTube. These are the researchers involved in originally its development. We became involved about 1.5 years ago when we were awarded the UK manufacturing license to it. And what we had to do is essentially take their research project and turn it into something real and tangible that could be used in clinics around the world. So as a manufacturer, we had a look at this, and the first thing we had to look at was the material. One of the negatives I believed in the study, they didn't think it was a negative, but I did, was they thought it was hot and sweaty. So we're like, right, how can we wrap something around someone's neck and it not be hot and sweaty? Well, that's a bit of a challenge, until we came across a material called Outlast. Has anyone heard of Outlast? So Outlast was developed by NASA. It's thermoregulating, okay? So if you're hot, it cools you down, and if you're cool, it warms you up. It's what they put inside winter fleeces so you don't overheat. If I wrap this around your arm, and I'll pass this around, you'll feel it cools your arm. Do you feel that? So this Outlast is impregnated into this fabric. This fabric was made specifically for us. It's crazy expensive. It has 3 layers. The outer layer is a cotton fluffy layer that we can attach stuff to. The middle layer is a type of EVA that you make insoles out of with, but it's in a lattice construction, so it's breathable. And the inner lining is Outlast. The 3 are chemically bonded in manufacture, so you can wash it as many times as you like and the layers will never come apart. But when we made it and designed it, we had to make 1,000 meters of it, and it was over €100 a meter. So it's a little bit of money. So after we'd spent nearly £100,000 on materials, we had a material that was essentially now cool on the inside, modifiable on the outside, and because of the padding inside it, it was also then heat moldable. So the fabric snood and the material layers that sit in the middle sandwich here are heat moldable. And we recommend that when people fit this, they warm it up with a heat gun first. It will mold around clavicles, it will stay up on its own, and it will conform to somebody's shape. Because of the way the material has been made, it means it's also trimmable. So it doesn't have a tracheotomy cutout. The reason why, every tracheotomy is in a slightly different position. So you will cut a tracheotomy hole in it, but the edges will never fray. If you cut through a stitch, just put a sideways stitch in it or stitch tape to stop it coming undone. All right. So the collar is trimmable. Washable in a washing machine, so we'd recommend putting it inside a pillowcase or a net bag. Fasten it first, take the struts off, okay? Put it into a washing machine, and it's heat adjustable. Everyone had a feel of the material? Yeah? So this material only exists for this product. We then have these support struts. So for the purposes of the instructional video, which is on YouTube, and in the information leaflet that comes out, we painted the struts silver so you can see them. In reality, the struts are black. And they're made of a low temperature thermoplastic, which is manufactured by Kydex. It's not normal Kydex, it's special Kydex, because this has a very high Young's modulus. It's bendy, but it springs back to its original shape. So we have this available in different shapes, but in 2 thicknesses. So the thicker material is 4 times stronger than the other material. So when you get a HeadUp collar and you open the pouch, everything's stuck to the side. The fabric collar comes in the middle bit with the instructions. The 2mm struts are here. The 3mm struts are there. These struts are 4 times stronger than these struts. Okay? We sell replacement ones as well. All right? So that's how it goes. So with all of these struts, the first thing I'd say is you don't have to put every strut on the patient. We had one patient once who managed to get all of the struts on themselves and then said to us, "I can't move." You're not supposed to wear all the struts. The struts exist so that you can customize the amount of support a patient requires, and you can also push in different places. So, when we have a look at this central one up here is the A-frame. So this A-frame is flat. So this is designed to take the weight of the chin and deflect that load onto the chest, okay? This normally comes flat. So what I've done in the previous group is I've heated this up with my heat gun, and I've introduced a shape into it that's slightly rounded underneath the chin. I don't want that flat. Underneath your chin's not flat, it will dig in. And if patients have central pressure issues, you can always pad that area. But what you can also do is offload it by shaping it. We then heat the sides of the struts, and what I'm going to do is just show you how to do that. So heat gun on a medium heat, hair dryer on high, okay? So gradually work across it. Do not heat the Velcro side. Velcro melts. If Velcro melts, it doesn't stick. And you just ruin the strut. Someone always heats the melted side, it happens. It's a little bit like on a cake box. Do you know what it says on the underneath of a cake box? It says, "Do not turn upside down." How do you know that unless you turn it upside down? So, what I'm doing with this is applying some gentle heat across the struts, yeah? I'm not trying to get to it to a point that it turns into a liquid. That would be bad. But when I heat the plastic, because this thermoplastic is designed to flex, if I put a tight radius into it, a tight angle, the plastic's more likely to fail. To create a spring, we want a long, gentle curve. So by heating that strut up now, I can introduce a long, gentle curve, okay? Like so. Can I borrow you for a minute, sir? Will you be my guinea pig? Thank you for volunteering. Yeah. I've always found if you pick on people, they can't really say no. Come and have a seat for me. So what I'm going to do, I'm not going to heat up the snoot, but I'm going to put this on you if that's okay. Just to show you how to do it. I'm going to do it from behind so you can all see. They thought I got in front of the video last time. So this sits around the back of your head, okay? The fabric snoot sits around, so normally I would have heated this. This doesn't have to be perfect, but this is a platform to move forward. Now, the vast majority of patients during the clinical trials were patients who had significant weakness. There's one patient group that we've discovered since do really well without a lot. As soon as you give them something that soft and touches them, it increases the proprioceptive stimulus to that part of the body and their dystonia reduces. If you then take those patients and apply pressure to the front of the chin, and I haven't got you quite in the center. There you go. Is that even?
That's okay.
Yeah. So if you then apply some pressure to the center of the chin on a patient with cervical dystonia, their head stops wobbling. It's the craziest thing in the world, no, right? But we've actually now got people putting struts under the front of chins to try to push chins back for cervical dystonia patients. We're also using it a lot on Parkinson's. So in this position, I've heated my strut, I've pre-bent it. I'm never going to bend it to the actual shape. I want to bend it slightly straighter because I want the material to take some energy so that it's got some spring back. So I'm going to do this upside down, okay, like I'm in Australia. So I'm going to stick this underneath his chin, and the hooks on the back of this literally stick onto the front of the fabric. Now in that position, you can flex your chin all the way down to your chest, and it springs you back up. So the strength and the ability for you to generate corrective force is dependent upon the weakness of the patient. If the patient's really weak, you need to push hard. If the patient's not very weak, you don't need to push as hard. So I'd have it more bent as a radius, and as they get weaker, and I can always straighten it up. Okay? Now, do you ever see patients coming in with these head control problems? And this is one problem, but the bigger problem is they're also rotated, or worse, they're rotated and side flexed, with their ear sitting in front of their shoulder, and you look at your collar, you look at the patient, you look at your collar and go, this isn't going to work. So what we have, we nickname these the Z struts, but no one knows why. It's a joke, they're Z-shaped. Now the Z struts come in a left and a right Z, but you can decide which one goes where. This is the strongest part of the Z, this is the weakest part of the Z. So what I can do for a patient, and I've preheated this on another person, is I've put a bend in the top of the Z. You see that? Because what I'm going to do with this Z is there are some patients who may require more force to lift their chin. So I can't just always push on a chin. Yeah, the incidence of chin ulcers in rigid collars is reasonably high. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get underneath his jaw. And so what I'm going to do is position that strut under here and up under there. In that position now, I want you to try to rotate your head towards the door. No. I want you to try to rotate your head towards the door. Now relax. Do you feel the resistance? Try to side flex your head forwards and down to the left. So I can build in a degree of control for rotation and side flexion. I can also, if I want to get really aggressive and say, well, I'm going to stop you moving, and this is just the 2mm strut, but I can place this behind his ear. This is the zygomatic area of the skull, and press that onto his shoulder, and then say, now try and side flex, yeah? So try and push against it the other way. So you can do that. If I put one either side, I could totally stop him moving side to side. So I can address issues with extension by reinforcing at the back, because we have flat struts, and the flat struts can be configured to resist that flexion. So this is pushing him over. I'm just going to show you how strong these are. I'm not even going to bend that one. Yeah. But if your patient's worried about their head wobbling around in a car when they're traveling, you can quickly add the 2 side struts and stop their head moving and still give them the ability to move. If he's got dysphagia, flex your head. You could drink, swallow, flex his head. The struts can be removed and reapplied really, really simply.
Should the patient do it, or is it the clinician?
I would set them up with different struts.
Okay, so they can do it.
Yeah, absolutely, for different activities. The whole point of it is you're in control of this. If we start asking patients to do this, things will go horribly wrong, yeah? There are some very clever patients out there, but there are also some not so clever patients. All right? So thank you very much, sir. I'll take it. So just a word of note, to take it off is very difficult. You undo it and you take it off. Does anyone not say that again? It's very hard. Thank you. And once you've then got your struts on there, you just put the whole thing back on together. All right? So this Velcro material on the side, it's not Velcro. Velcro is trademark. We call this micro grip at TalarMade. So if I stick that onto there, grab the strut, pull it. In England, we say it sticks like something to a blanket. Have you ever heard that phrase? No, I'll tell you later when we're drinking beer. So the reality is, feel free to have a look at the different struts and the different configurations. What you've got to try to assess when you're seeing these is there are loads of different ways to do this. You don't have to use every strut. The A-frame is brilliant for just controlling a head that moves up and down. But if you have someone who goes, I've got too much pressure under my chin, then number one, make sure it's shaped. If they've still got too much pressure under the chin, you can pad it, but you can also add 2 Z struts to either side of the jaw to lift the head up. Yeah? The jaw's very good at taking weight. It doesn't cause any discomfort. And because you can heat mold the strut to get right underneath it, you can actually push the jaw up, and in some circumstances, you don't even need the chin pressure. So these are just to show you some examples of how we configure them for different people. It's the same patient, but it's just to show you. They're painted silver for effect. So as you can see here, we can deal with torticollis by putting it behind the ear. We can reinforce with 2 Z struts either side of the A-frame to lift the head more. We can configure with Z struts only to lift the chin, or 1 Z strut on one side only for mild head drop with rotation or side flexion. We can use the lollipop struts either side of it, as well as the A-frame inside the A-frame. The guys at Embrace have actually had a very, very difficult patient, chin on chest deformity, and they actually took the A-frame and they attached, where's the big thick strut? Not that one, not that one, the other lollipop strut, I'll find it. They actually molded the A-frame, and then they took this strut and riveted it onto there and onto there, so that it actually made the whole brace even stronger. And that was enough for that patient. This is about providing you with a bag of tools so that you can provide the degree of support that your patient gets. It's not an out-of-the-box product, but it's the only product in the world that is evidence for motor neuron disease, or ALS, and it's the only product in the world that's adjustable in the amount of support it gives while retaining the same height. So that's the real clear things, and we can do a whole load of different stuff with it. So, the summary. Patients that we think might not do well, those people who are scared of being closed in, they do exist. But even with some of those patients, they may have had a poor experience beforehand. It's still worth a try, because we found a lot of those patients have actually gone, actually, this feels even better than I thought it would. Patients with severe and long-standing established neck weakness may be too far gone. The problem we have when we introduce this into new countries is everyone with ALS gets one. That's great. But the ones who have been here for a long time are never going to magically be here. And the amount of force required to correct them may be more than they can tolerate. So we have to be realistic. We also have to always remember the research tells us 4 out of 5 do really well, the other one not so well. And that's for the whole patient population. You may need some help to put this on. So patients living on their own, this may not be the best solution for them, unless you can have someone to care and take it on and off. What we do know, there are huge advantages in terms of patient satisfaction, the ability to move, eating, drinking, swallowing, breathing, and adjustability that this collar has over everything else. The statistic is 80% of patients will choose this over every other collar that exists in the world right now. So what we recommend, get this on somebody early with light support. As soon as the patient begins to get weak, what we don't want is patients turning up in clinic here that we can't help. We know they're going to get weaker, don't provide them with too much support, but as soon as they start complaining that their neck is aching, they need to be going into this. We know from the clinical studies that it appears that alignment is maintained. We seem to be preventing contractures. We haven't measured that fully yet. And we also are pretty certain that we don't make patients weaker quicker. So as a difference, this is transformative in the care of patients with ALS, but it's also massively being used for patients with Parkinson's, muscular dystrophy, spinal muscular atrophy, stroke, traumatic brain injury, as well as any other patients. Some people are actually using it for patients who suffer with positional vertigo and head control and all sorts of other stuff. That's not what it's for. The ongoing clinical studies at Sheffield University right now are cervical dystonia and Parkinson's. And those two patient groups seem to be doing really, really well. The challenge with cervical dystonia, how do you feed yourself if your head's moving? How do you have a drink? Have you seen the spoon that was invented in England by a university for someone with a shaking hand? They shake the hand and the spoon stays still. It's the coolest thing in the world. Well, this seems to be the way of stopping the head wobbling, okay, for the right patient. But it's one of those things that we will continue to evolve, and our relationship with Embrace is going to allow us to plug that research into Sweden. I really welcome feedback because it's my job to make this better and better and better and better. And I won't rest because at the end of the day, what we do changes people's lives. And this is just the tool that hopefully you'll start using to help influence your patients. So thank you very much for coming.
Thank you, Simon.